All right, today we're going to dig into this really fascinating story coming out of a high school Spanish class, and it uncovers this surprising paradox between what students can do and how they feel about doing it. So what happens when a perfect score isn't the whole story? Let's get into it.
So picture this. You've got this complex, week-long debate unit, all taught in Spanish. And at the end of it, every single one of the 20 students gets a perfect score. I mean, that's a home run, right? A complete success? And, on paper, it absolutely is.
But here's where it gets interesting. When the students actually reflected on their own performance, their feedback pointed to something way more insightful. It turns out that a flawless grade doesn't always translate to flawless confidence.
So first things first, let's just look at this result. I mean, it's pretty stunning. How in the world did an entire class totally master such a challenging unit? Well, the answer starts to pull back the curtain on this paradox at the very heart of learning.
And there it is. This is the big one, the core finding. Even with perfect marks, the students themselves, when they were asked, said the thing they needed to work on most wasn't their skill, it was their self-confidence. They knew the material, sure, but they didn't always feel like they knew it.
What's so wild is when you put it side by side like this. On one side, you've got the hard data, the external proof, a perfect 4 out of 4 score, exemplary. But then on the other side, you've got how they felt. They're saying, I need more confidence to feel natural. And that right there is the gap between competence and confidence.
Okay, so how did the teacher pull this off? How do you design a unit that not only gets perfect scores, but also reveals such a deep insight? Let's, pop the hood and take a look at the anatomy of this incredibly effective and really efficient unit.
So get this, the whole thing was a 1-week sprint. And look at that total time, just 3.75 hours. This wasn't some long, drawn-out project. Nope, it was a super focused, intense burst of learning that really packed a punch.
One of the secret ingredients here was connecting the classroom to the real world. They had a 15-minute live interview with a famous TikToker. Think about it. It's an authentic, modern, and super engaging model for how people actually talk. And it worked. A third of the class just jumped right in to ask questions.
Now, another really cool innovation was these 6 different debate roles. See, instead of just having 2 teams arguing back and forth, this structure gave every single student a specific, really important job to do. It played to all kinds of different strengths, from being a leader as the moderator to digging into the details as the fact-checker.
Let's zoom in on one of the most creative roles for a second, the cultural analyst. This student's job wasn't just to argue a point. No, they were tasked with analyzing how cultural values from different Spanish-speaking countries would actually shape someone's perspective. I mean, that is just a brilliant way to bake deep cultural understanding right into the lesson.
And to make it less intimidating, students were given these little sentence frames, kind of like scaffolding. So the cultural analyst could start their point with this phrase, desde la perspectiva cultural de, which just means from the cultural perspective of. This gave them the structure they needed to express these really complex ideas in Spanish. It's a small thing that makes a huge difference.
Okay, so now let's get to the real heart of it. We've seen how the unit was built. Now let's look at the data and see exactly how this confidence-competence gap showed up in the students' own words. So just take a look at this table. The students rated themselves on 9 key skills. And for 8 of them, we're talking things like using evidence, listening. The main answer was always. But then, look at that one outlier, sitting right there in the middle. Use Spanish for persuasion. For that one, the answer was most of the time.
And here's the crucial takeaway. This isn't a failure, not at all. This is actually a massive success. It shows that these students have incredible metacognitive awareness. They're so tuned in to their own learning that they can pinpoint the exact skill that separates just being competent from having real mastery and confidence.
So let's just put a label on it. On one side, we have competence. That's the external proof, the perfect score. And on the other, you have confidence. That's the internal feeling, that desire to be more spontaneous, more sure of yourself. You see, they could do it, but what they really wanted was to own it.
So, the big question is, what do you do with this information? Well, that incredibly precise self-awareness the students showed us, that's the key. The report lays out some really clear, actionable strategies for any educator who wants to bridge this exact gap, basically using the students' own insights as a roadmap.
So to build that confidence directly, the recommendations create this really powerful feedback loop. And it's not just about more practice. It starts with low-stakes speaking, where the pressure's off. Then, students use video to reflect on their own performance, which lets them see their own success. It helps close that gap between how they feel and how they actually sound. Then you add in peer feedback that's focused on strengths, and finally, you give them real tools to manage performance anxiety.
And to target that specific language goal using persuasive Spanish, the strategy is all about building what's called automaticity, which is just a fancy way of saying you make the language so familiar it becomes effortless. You do this by creating phrase banks for things like agreeing or disagreeing, and by practicing improvisational speaking. The whole goal is to move those advanced phrases from something they have to consciously think about to something that's just there when they need it.
What this whole story really proves is that we don't have to choose between a perfect performance and resilient confidence. The two can and absolutely should grow together. And maybe that leaves us with a bigger question to think about. How can we shift our focus from just checking the box in competence to actively building the kind of confidence that lets our students take their skills and truly own them out in the world?